Hello friends, today's video is going to be a little bit of a hybrid of a few different things. I wanted to go through some ARCs that I've gotten recently, so in some ways it's a little bit of a book haul, but then also it's somewhat of a TBR as I really want to prioritize a lot of the books that have been sent to me by publishers, but then I also wanted to have a very brief discussion about ARCs, as I think there's a lot of questions that come up about how do reviewers get ARCs, how do they get physical ARCs specifically as opposed to digital ARCs, those sorts of things. So I just wanted to kind of acknowledge some of that information and then transition into talking about the books themselves. So starting with the getting ARCs, the receiving of ARCs, I know a lot of people are aware of NetGalley. If you don't know what it is though, NetGalley is a website where you can request books that you're interested in, and oftentimes they will get sent to your device through the NetGalley, I think it's called the NetGalley Shelf app, something like that. But you can have an app where the books will be sent to that and then you can read them digitally. Sometimes you can request audiobooks on NetGalley as well, and there are instances sometimes where you can have them sent to your Kindle, and then other times, depending I think on the publisher, the digital copies have to be read on the app. And after a certain amount of time, there is basically an expiration date, and if you don't read the book by that date, you won't have access to it anymore. So you do want to try and ensure that if they're sending you something, that you do get around to it and that you get those early reviews up as a thank you for that access. For me, I, like a lot of people, when I first tried getting a NetGalley account, I went a little I was a little much with my requests, because I think in my head, and I think this is true of other reviewers I've spoken to, you don't think you're gonna get approved for anything. I was about to say improved. You don't think you're gonna get approved for anything, so then you just request everything that sounds interesting in hopes like, oh, I hope a publisher takes a chance on me, and then you'll get flooded with so many ARCs, and you're like, oh shoot, I guess this is gonna be my reading for the next few months, maybe years, because you will be really surprised how much you will get approved for. And I've always been really appreciative of the chances I have gotten in being able to get a fair amount of digital ARCs. I have come to notice for myself over the last few years that I do just so much better with physical copies and audiobooks. I've mentioned before that I prefer immersion reading, which is a combination of audio and reading a physical copy. For me, that's just the best way to retain the information, to stay focused while I'm reading. And I always want to ensure that whatever I'm reviewing, I'm actually giving a good amount of, not a good amount, like all my attention too. I don't want to be distracted when I'm reading, and I want to ensure that if I'm reviewing something, I'm reviewing it fully and with that full attention. So the digital ARCs, while I was grateful to get them, and I know it's very convenient for a lot of people, physical ARCs have just been my preference, and so I've kind of toned it back when it comes to requesting digital. If you do not have that issue though, then go wild on NetGalley, request to your heart's desire, and hopefully that will really help you if you are somebody who is hoping to be getting more reviews out early. If you are somebody who you read casually here and there, you like using maybe Goodreads or Storygraph, but you don't really think of yourself as a reviewer, still, if it sounds like something you would enjoy, I'd say go for it. You'd be really surprised if you have basically any kind of reviewing presence online. There's a pretty good chance that you'll get approved, and the more that you do reviews, the higher your percentage goes up, and then the more likely you are to get approved for other things. So I'd say go for it if it's something you're interested in. As far as physical ARCs, sometimes physical ARCs get sent to me when I have not requested anything. I'll admit that while I'm appreciative, I'm also a little frustrated at times, because in my mind, that's a book that could be going to some other reviewer that really wants it. I think most of the time when I get sent something I haven't requested, it is perhaps the publisher's way of trying to get the word out about something that's less known. So I'm kind of on the edge of the fence here as to whether I like it or don't like it, because if it is something that's less well known, then I'm like, well, okay, they're trying to get the word out there, which I do appreciate, because that means they're doing their job trying to make sure that the author's work gets noticed. So I appreciate that. But I just don't like getting things unsolicited. So it's kind of, I'm not sure how I feel entirely about that. But usually it's through NetGalley that I have gotten physical copies because the publisher, they have that information, they can send it. Other times you can join newsletters for certain publishing houses, like Orbit is by far, for me, the one I've had the most success with, where if I request something, they pretty much always send it to me. They're actually even offering audiobooks oftentimes as well. And if you're interested in a series and you didn't hear about it until the second or third book has come out, you can sometimes request that they send you the earlier works in the series. I don't think I've ever actually done that though, because I would feel really bad requesting a second or third book when I don't know for sure if I'm even going to like the first one, because in my head I'm just like, oh, somebody else should get it. It's already a privilege to even get it, so I don't want to hog up space basically for, because sometimes they're not even arcs, they're finished copies, so I'm like, I'd rather, well, they would have to be in the case of if it's an earlier work so you could read later in the series. Anyway, so Orbit's been fantastic. I think Penguin, especially Penguin Teen, they will send out a newsletter. The contact through Penguin Teen is quite friendly, and it's been really seamless. They send out something, and then if you're interested, you just fill out a form, and then often, eventually, those books will arrive on your doorstep, which is really great. So what you can do if you want to try to get on these newsletters, you can try following these publishers on social media. You can see if they have just a general newsletter that goes out and sign up for that. And then if you end up seeing at some point in the newsletter that they are specifically doing one for reviewers to get arcs, that's your chance to try and get on the list. Anyway, that's, I think, all of the information I wanted to highlight about getting arcs. I've done other conversations in the past about arcs, and I think there's not too much mystery about it at this point because a lot of people speak pretty openly about it, but I just wanted to get that information out there if you yourself are interested, or if you've just always wanted to know, if you've been curious about it. All that said, getting into the ones that I've gotten recently and that I will probably be reading sometime in the next few months. Part of me saying next few months and not just saying like, oh yeah, these are for sure going to be my next books on my TBR is just because I like to mix in backlist fantasy as well as new fantasy so that there's a nice balance, and I don't want to only prioritize one over the other. But all that said, first up we have Fathom Folk. This is one that I had on my anticipated releases, and I was figuring I'll get around to it when I get around to it. One of my friends actually got a digital arc of this, and they quite enjoyed it. They feel like the characters do read rather young, but that they are acting appropriately to their age, because a lot of times in fantasy the characters are young and then they act fully grown or much older and wiser than their years. And also the setting sounds really cool. It seems like an underwater metropolis, so I'm really excited to eventually jump into that one. Next up is a sequel. We have The Hemlock Queen. So this one's available April, and at the time I'm filming this, it's not April, but it's coming up. So this is one I might wait a little bit closer to the fall. I'm not sure though, because I don't want to wait too long from the time that I read the first one, but the first one's setting was so fantastic for the fall, and it was actually genuinely kind of creepy in a few scenes, even though it's considered fantasy and not horror. I just found that the horror elements that were in there were genuinely, there was a few pieces of imagery in the book that I was like, this is like legitimately kind of creepy and scary. So I might want to wait a little bit. That's the conundrum, right, with new releases, and when they feel really fitting of certain seasons, you're like, do I wait? Do I jump in? But anyway, The Hemlock Queen, I am excited to see where the story goes from there. This is one of those rare instances where I genuinely prefer reading for the characters as opposed to the plot or the setting. But the characters, I could take them or leave them. I don't really love them. They're definitely very distinct. They kind of irritated me from time to time. But the setting is so cool that I'm like, oh, but I really want to keep going. I don't hate the characters. I just want to be clear. I don't hate them, but I think that's a setting story for me, which is very rare. Next up, this is a finished copy sent to me from Del Rey, so a big thank you to them, because I was not expecting this, which would be The Tainted Cup. I mean, I was expecting when they emailed and asked if I was interested in a copy, and I said yes. I was expecting for it to arrive in the mail. I was caught off guard by the email, though, so thank you to Del Rey. I've heard good things about The Tainted Cup. I have read something by Robert Jackson Bennett in the past, and that particular story, which would be Foundry Side, I didn't dislike, but it also, I was like, I kind of want to read something else by Robert Jackson Bennett. So I have, I believe, the title City of Stairs that I want to check out at some point. And The Tainted Cup just sounds really unusual, really bizarre, very eccentric and different and unique. And I'm excited about that. And also, this is printed right on the hardback. And isn't it so beautiful? I was really blown away by that. So thank you to Del Rey. Very different. This is available May of 2024. We have the Honey Witch, and this sounds so cute. This is one that I think is just going to be absolutely precious, and it just seems so cozy. I love, I've said many a time that we have so much cozy fantasy now, and that it's really exploding, this subgenre of fantasy. It's great, and I think it just makes fantasy that much more accessible. And for those of us that love the big epic series, these are just the perfect things to pick up in between when you don't necessarily want to read another genre. You just want to read something that's maybe not as much of a commitment. And I think cozy fantasy fits that really well. Plus, they're just nice, you know? They're just a nice break from reality sometimes too. So I've been really enjoying cozy fantasy, and this one sounds precious. And this is Red Hook specifically. Next up is one that I got this arc a while ago, and I might have mentioned it in the past, but I wanted to mention it again if I have, just because it sounds so cool, and I've not seen too much hype yet for this, even though it sounds so good, and that would be Spin of Fate. So this is a book that Rosaria Munda, who wrote the Fireborn, the Aurelian Cycle series, but Fireborn's the first one. She has enjoyed this, and I'm always like, well, if Rosaria liked it. So I'm curious about it for that alone, but also there's comparisons to Full Metal Alchemist, and I love Full Metal Alchemist. There's also some comparisons to Avatar: The Last Airbender, which if you don't know, over on my side channel, Full Meta Analysis, I have been watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, the original, for the first time, and if you want to follow along with me as I watch that and continue to fall in love with it, I'll have my side channel linked. I have been loving that series so much. It's so good. I know now why everybody's so obsessed with it. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. Its comp titles sound like this is made for me. And I am really excited to give it a go. Now to another cozy fantasy, and this one's been compared to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and I was like, well, and that would be Letter to the Luminous Deep. And it says it's available April, so coming up. And this one, I feel like there's going to be a sense of sadness to it too, because if I'm not mistaken, you follow, I think, 2 different sets of people, and one set is believed to be dead, I think, in that they had been sending letters to each other, and then the other set of people is learning about them through these letters, something like that. I obviously don't know because I haven't picked it up yet, but I'm like, that sounds sad. But then it sounds like maybe it's going to be cute. I don't know, maybe they're not dead. Maybe they're just presumed to be dead and they're not, and there will be something happy. I don't know. I'm like, I haven't even read it yet, and I'm already invested. I'm like, I don't want them to be dead. But regardless, this sounds really, it actually genuinely sounds like it's going to be cozy, and that there's going to be some underwater vibes, which is pleasant and nice. And then this last one, I don't know much about this at all. I haven't seen anything really, and so this is an example of an arc that I didn't request, but that got sent to me, and I'm grateful because it's put it on my radar now, and that would be The Princess of Thornwood Drive, and it says every fantasy has a princess, a hero, and a villain. So this is the cover. The color pattern on this cover is quite beautiful. Just the deeper blues mixed with the brighter colors is a combination you don't see very much, which I know has nothing to do with the story itself. But it says, 2 sisters, 2 worlds, 1 grave danger to them both. Lane Highland would give anything to be in another reality, any reality, so it seems like maybe there's some sci-fi elements as well. Ever since the accident that killed her parents and left her younger sister paralyzed and nonverbal, Lane's been overwhelmed by grief and mind-numbing responsibility, but she clings to a single bright strand of hope that one day the sister she knew will come back to her. Alyssa lives in a world woven with light and Caribbean magic, a fairy tale-like existence where her parents have disappeared into the dark forest, and she's been cursed as a changel. And it looks like almost changeling and angel, so changel. As evil starts to spread through the kingdom, she's desperate to pierce the veil between her realm and her sister's and give warning. For a dark prince is intent on winning Lane's heart, and now the sisters must find a way back to each other or risk being separated forever. So the premise sounds quite interesting. It definitely has a setting that you don't see as often in fantasy, which I always appreciate. But that's it for some arcs that I've gotten recently. So books to be on the lookout for that I will likely be reading at some point over the course of the next few months. A big thank you to all of these publishers. Hopefully this information that I mentioned at the beginning was helpful and informative. Thanks to all of you for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.